Next, we have media, don't we? And media monoculture versus fragmented culture. So I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. Don't know why I did a dance, but I'm vibing. And I had four TV channels to watch until 1997, until we got cable satellite, where we had a few more, and I could watch Nickelodeon and MTV. And I was very privileged to be able to do that because, again, not everybody in Britain subscribed to satellite or cable TV. I read a lot of books. I loved The Babysitters Club. I loved Sweet Valley High, Sweet Valley Twins. I loved Point Horror. I was a prolific reader, and there was lots of interesting genres to read that reflected life, and I got my social cues from. Because there was no social media, there was MSN Messenger as I was an older teenager, but unless we were all online at the same time, because it was dial-up, it was expensive, we weren't. And that didn't happen until, the early 2000s, really, when I think MSN Messenger kind of came along with that digital upgrade of, broadband. And then the smartphone. Before that was the mobile phone. And as I talked about, I had a phone and I was texting, and it was very exciting. But what was sad is that when I was at school, we'd all talk about TV programs that we all had a shared experience of, like, Neighbours. Those of you that grew up in the 80s and 90s will have watched Neighbours, or Home and Away. They would have been big things to watch, or Hollyoaks. These were these teen-based soaps. Well, Neighbours and Home and Away weren't really teen, but they did have a teen appeal. They had kind of thought about including teenage storylines in there. We all watched Grange Hill. We all watched Byker Grove. We, all watched Top of the Pops. I mean, Top of the Pops was a big part of my growing up. I watched it as a child. Even my dad sat and watched Top of the Pops because he'd watched it as a teenager himself. And it was still going on in the 80s and the 90s up until 2006. And then obviously the internet had fragmented this consumption of media, and Top of the Pops wasn't going to be the thing that everybody was watching, which was a real shame. And I suppose we lost something. I mean, we might have gained things in other ways, but some of it is a bit of a sad. We still had the same news. There was a national tone. I remember watching Princess Diana's, the news of her passing. I remember watching 9/11. I remember watching the Berlin Wall. I was very young when the Berlin Wall came down, but I do remember my mum sitting there and talking about it and explaining it to me. Whereas my children don't sit and watch the news with me. Like, sometimes I listen to it on the radio and I get questions, and we do talk about like current affairs, but it's just not on in the same way that perhaps it was to me as a very observational child growing up. So again, is this a whole generation that doesn't consume news in the same way because they're watching it on different platforms now? And we all had the same celebrities, Spice Girls, Take That, Britney